took a little longer than I expected. So basically, this is part 3 to my little parting videos of me being up here at my extended relative's cottage. And I decided after I recorded the last one to let my phone get some charge, make myself something to eat and all that. I made puffed quinoa with some canned corn medley and beans and pepper, and had it on some grain bread. And my God, was it delicious. Might look like slop, but it goddamn mwah. Mwah. I don't know why I didn't do but as you can tell, it's very much a different time of day. It got quite a few hours ahead of me, making this last, well, possibly last video. I don't think I'm going to do a part 4 if I say everything that I want to say in this one. Oh yeah, I didn't end up doing any of the other shit that I wanted to do today. So that's well, disappointing. Why did I not do them? Well, I just, after making the last 2 videos and reeling over everything that I was discussing and stuff going on in my head, well, I kind of lost motivation for it. Damn temporal lobe. God, I really make a lot of neurology jokes. Just now hearing myself out loud. Yeah. So anyway, also sorry if I also now seem a little lethargic, because I am quite full from my dinner, or what I made to eat. What I've been snacking on. I had pumpkin pie today, some samosas that I had refrigerated that I bought at the store in Peterborough when I went with one of my coworkers. The quinoa corn medley thing, some juice, and I just drank a rather disgusting protein shake. Just got it to try, and also because when I get on the road, if I make them last, which after the taste, I'm not very inclined to drink it again, but I'll try and make it last for when I'm actually on the road, so it can come in handy as some form of nutrition. But my God, quick little story. When I was in Toronto, leaving, like getting in the week leading up to me leaving Toronto, when I was sleeping on the streets, and getting all the necessities that I needed, at one point I had bought a whole pack from a convenience store in the Scarborough district. I had bought, it was down by the Cedarbrae area. I bought these protein peanut butter cookies, and they used xylitol and sea salt in it, and probably some other artificial stuff. It claimed natural flavors, but my God, did none of that taste natural, unless, I don't think xylitol is a natural sugar. Maybe it is, or natural sweetener. I mean, it's not good for you at all, but it was cheap, and I thought, okay, maybe to give me some amount of energy or protein, and my God, it tasted horrendous. I can't even really describe the taste. I don't remember the brand of the cookie, but it was some, like, it seemed like one of those companies that pushes like pseudoscience, protein, increase strength, replenish muscle cell membranes. If you eat this, it seemed like one of those companies, basically. So just the taste, it was like I ate spoiled. It's like if I poured a bunch of sea salt in my mouth and then drank spoiled milk. That's the best way I can describe the taste of that cookie. And that protein shake tastes almost like a liquidated form of that. Now, it didn't say it had like xylitol or anything in it, but it said it had salt, and I'm wondering if they use sea salt. But also, unfortunately, it said it had carrageenans in it, which are, well, they can potentially be quite toxic. And from what I know, cancer-causing. They're in a lot of dairy-based ingredients sometimes. Well, certain dairy-based ingredients, I think, have them. And also certain plant-based products have them in plant-based milks, which is why there are the brands that often say, like, no carrageenans and no, like, it doesn't, like, they removed any carrageen material in it. But, I mean, I'm not an expert on it. I'm not a farmologist. I think farmologist. Well, I'm not an agriculturalist, but anyway, just from what I know of my knowledge, is there can have potentially toxins in them. But yeah, it was disgusting. I'm not getting rid of them. I can stomach them. So, and for me going the route that I'm going to be taking up to Ottawa, that'll come in handy. Also forgive me because it's getting, as you can tell, it's late. It's right now 11:15 at night. So yeah, I'm a little tired. Well, not terribly tired, but anyway. So this third part, I wanted to make, so I had said what I mainly wanted to say about my whole ethical crisis and existential dilemma that I've been experiencing in the last two videos. Now I'd like to talk about my fears and insecurities, and also also tell of a terrifying experience that happened to me over the summer. And if I have time, if I have time, I think I will talk about like the first job that technically not the first job. I think actually they'll be either on the end of this one, or if I do another part, I will attach some clips that I shot earlier in the summer of of me on the last day that I rode my motorized bike, my intersex motorized baby boy, Timmy, because I had to give him away because he was falling apart at the seams. And then the golf cart I had and was driving around Trudy, who again is now sold. So, yeah, if I have time, I want to talk about the job experience I had with the landscaping company that I quit within 2 weeks, as said in the stupidest thing I ever attempted video. So yeah, ow, I just stabbed myself with my nail. That did not feel nice. So, where do I start? Well, okay. First, I actually think I'll start by relaying the terrifying experience that I had over the summer. Actually, fitting atmosphere to do it at night, kind of. So, it happened a little bit after I'd arrived here. Actually, I think it was it was probably at the beginning of June, I want to say. Like end of May, beginning of June. Like it was closer to when I had arrived here at the cottage. And it was after, as I'd said I said in the video of when the cottage was under attack by fucking every animal in the wilderness that one night. Still freaking baffles me what the hell was going on that fucking night. Like freaking lotus-looking things, a giant spider, rat, frog. Just, my God. It happened a little bit after that. I think that was posted. Yeah, I posted that in like, I think May. Or at the end of May. It happened a little bit after that, I'll say, because after that video, I think maybe a few days after, almost a week, one of my relatives who's handy with mechanical engineering was fixing up Timmy for me because, as well said in the when I had arrived in Lakefield and the whole cosmic irony thing joke with how Timmy popped a flat, they brought me up here. I should also probably state, I said I was gonna just walk Timmy up to the cottage like the rest of the way if I couldn't find anyone to get it fixed. But one of my relatives called me and just told me, or suggested to me, that I just have someone come to get me who lived near there, and for reasons I didn't want to, but I'll probably state that in a bit, as I'm kind of a refuser to help, like refuser for other people's help, it seems, as I said in, I think, my first video of me leaving, that I may have some more leaning traits of, well, some leaning independent complex traits, or towards, I guess, independent personality disorder or something like that. They might just be traits of it, I don't know, or at least during this whole thing. But anyway, so this happened a little bit after that, and it still reigns right now, at least, as the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. But so let me explain. On that day, I woke up, I went out with Timmy, who was holding together well enough. So the repairs that I'm grateful, I'm very grateful for this relative doing repairs on the equipment on Timmy. But unfortunately, they could really only do so much, and inevitably their wiring and just the exhaust chamber it was all just coming apart again. And that would be a loon calling. But so on that day, I went out to search for jobs. This was before I got the landscaping job. I was just going around the local area, wherever I could find a business of any kind, trying to put my resume at places. I even went to some farms just to knock on doors and see if whoever owned the place or owned the land around there needed any workers on the farm for minimum wage pay. And actually, funnily enough, I put my resume at the job that I'm working at now, and they never called me back, if any of you are watching. Yeah, they never called me back, and then it wasn't until July, on the third day that I had my side-by-side, that I was so desperate for a job. Like, I was getting to a point, because my funds were dwindling at the time. I literally said that, and I also paid a hell of a lot for the side-by-side. Once again, similar to Trudy, over $1,000. Not going to say specifically how much, but it was a lot, and that wreaked havoc on my bank account. But I decided that, okay, because it was at the beginning of August when I got my side-by-side, I said, if I don't have anything like, well, actually, no, I should say, it was at the end of July, almost beginning of August. I said, if I don't have anything by, like, beginning of August, I'm dipping. I'm packing up and going to Ottawa then, because I'll talk about the reason why, because it relates to fear in somewhat. Anyway, on that day, I was going all around the local county areas trying to apply to different jobs and all that, and I went through some back trails along to a campground that led to a highway that went close to Lakefield and then also went a long ways into Peterborough. And I decided I was going to go into Peterborough to try and get some necessities that I thought I needed. Some groceries and also just some other things, possibly to help prepare Timmy, but that didn't end up happening. But the reason it didn't end up happening was because I got into the city very late. Like right when I arrived into Peterborough, the sun was already starting to set, and like by the time I reached into the, I want to say the northeast section of Peterborough, it was dark, and a lot of the places that I needed to go to were closed. So I just looked on Google Maps with the data that I have, because again, even though I've now been failing at it, I said I was going to try and conserve the data as much as possible, because I'm still on a plan with the people in my household. They're still paying for the data that I use, and I don't obviously use it I don't use it to a large extent, or at least as much as I did before, but I have been slipping on for the last 2 months of like how much I use, and because I try and conserve it in case there was any additional charges, which I don't want them to have. But anyway, I looked on Google Maps to see if there's any place open that I could just rest at and like not sleep, just stop at. And there was a cafe that was open until like 2 a.m. So it was in the downtown area. So I went to the downtown area and just sat in there, ordered some food, like a small amount, and then I just thought to myself. And then past midnight, I thought, okay, you know what? I should probably head back now through the countryside in the dark. And another thing I should mention was the light I had on Timmy, which I then rigged up to Trudy, both the lights, one of them was malfunctioning because the batteries weren't working well. And so literally, as I would be driving in the dark, it worked well when it was functioning properly, but when it wasn't, which was the latter half of when I had Timmy, I would have to literally do the thing you see in fucking fiction, where you just smack the light and then it stays on for, I'd smack it, it'd stay on for maybe like 3 minutes, and then it'd start to flicker, and then have to hit it again. And literally, I decided, well, I didn't have any equipment to sleep there in the city for the night, and I couldn't go to a hotel as, well, if you saw my videos of me when I was in Peterborough for the first time, well, then you know why. But anyway, I decided to head out of the city. I headed out in the dark through the countryside past Lakefield, and I started to go up this county road that led to the village of Warsaw, which is around here, which is close to where I filmed Well, the Warsaw Caves are where I filmed the motion liminal space videos, for the most part, most of the clips in them. But so, oh, sorry, I got something stuck in my tooth. Anyway, okay, back on topic. I was coming up to an intersection that went off into the village of Warsaw. It was literally just a stop sign and an old building. And as I was getting close to it onto me, I was going like average speed for my motorized bike, which is maybe like, if you know, like a traditional, like a motorized scooter, I think one of my friends told me the fastest that it can go, or like the average speed it goes, is 28 kilometers an hour. Don't know, you can calculate how fast that is. My bike was like maybe a little bit slower than that at the average speed, but so I was coming close to that intersection, and as I was going along, I wasn't dressed properly for the temperature drop of the night. I didn't bring my large coat. I literally just had my my sweater on, like the blue sweater that I wear underneath my coat, and my riding gloves. That was it. And as I was going along, at a point there was what looked to be a dirt trail on the side of the road, because this road was surrounded by forests for the most part. There was very sparse housing. There was what looked to be a dirt trail, and my light was flickering and I was smacking at it, and at the time of when it happened, well, afterwards, when I talked to friends and family about it, I didn't know, and this is the logical assumption. Some people were telling me one option was not logical, but you know what? It is. The three possibilities are, well, I'll say in a second. I was passing by it, and I was close to the shoulder of the road where this little dirt path was, and as I was hitting my light, it shone for a little second, and as I passed it, I thought I saw coming out, or lumbering out from this dirt path that led into the woods, coming onto the road, I thought I saw something pale white on all fours that was about the size of a large dog, and it looked like if whatever it was had an inverted, I was going fast so I don't know, but I thought it would have like inverted legs. Again, I couldn't tell. I didn't see its head or if it had a tail. I was going way too fast for that, and immediately when I passed it, I screamed bloody murder, the loudest I've ever screamed in my life, and I accelerated my throttle to the max that it could go. And when I did that, the other light that I had that was also giving me problems because it was kind of loosening, so I was trying to fix it, fell off into my hand, or more so, I guess I was holding it, so I guess I might have ripped it off. And I shone it, I think it was because I had it as like it was a little strobe light, or I had a strobe light setting, I had it on that. But I shined it behind me and I quickly looked, and I don't know if I shined it in the right direction because it might have been going a bit off, like above the road, but I thought I saw whatever this thing was chasing me, and it looked like, again, from my dark vision, that it was right behind me. And I was basically screaming and crying and just was accelerating my throttle to the max, and I just looked forward and didn't look behind me. I drove straight in the middle of the road. There were no cars, so it was just a desolate country road in the middle of the night, and I didn't even care if I crashed at that moment. I wasn't wearing a helmet because I didn't have one anymore after, well, I left it in Lakefield because when Timmy popped the flat, I was like, you know what, fuck it. It may not get fixed, and I was like, I don't want to lug this around. So I literally left it with the home hardware. I went to a home hardware store and I asked some employees if they knew how to, like, had any mechanics and knew anyone around here who could fix it, and literally they were like, no, we don't. And I was just like, hey, you guys sell helmets? And they were like, yeah, we may sell helmets. And I just like, here, have one for free, and left it on the stoop. And they were like, well, you don't have to do that. You'll get your bike fixed. And I was like, yeah, I probably will, but I don't want to lug that around with me, so you can do whatever you want with it. And I don't know what happened to that helmet. But anyway, I was accelerating, and there was turns on the roads that I was able to make. I tried to turn off into Warsaw at the intersection because I saw it like coming right up past me, but I tried to. It's going way too fast. I skidded, and I was like, nope, we're not turning. We're going forward. We're just keep going straight. And I got over a hill to a section where there was no light, and it was just in between a old farmhouse and a barn that was down a ways. And then I fucking ran out of gas. Because I should have mentioned as well, I had filled up my gas earlier in the day at a small gas station in McCracken's Landing. And I'd used it all up because the tank could hold. It took a mix of I believe I explained this in the Peterborough videos. Timmy's tank took a mix of gas and a bit of two-stroke oil, and well, it took a liter of gas and a small amount of two-stroke oil, and that could get me like a 3 hours distance, which it did. It lasted for a while, and then, well, I would obviously have to make stops to fuel up on it, but I just forgot, I guess. Well, oh, no, wait, no. When I was in the city, in Peterborough, I did try and fill up on gas before leaving, but the gas station I went to was closed, so I was just like, fuck it, I think I have enough to make it, and then I went out back to the cottage, or tried to at least, and then I broke down in the middle of nowhere there. I got off my bike immediately, I pulled out my pocket knife, and I took my phone, and I took the flashlight, well, I had a flashlight that was attached to me. I took that and was just scanning around me, hyperventilating. I didn't see anything, and then I immediately, because I didn't know what to do, as I seem to do in states of not knowing, well, in states of uncertainty, I called the police. And basically, the operator was nice enough, but they weren't very helpful in the moment, because they were about to hang up and tell me, okay, sir, you need a tow truck. And I explained to them, no, something was possibly chasing me. I don't want to be out here alone. Can you please just send someone with weaponry out here, and just in case? And they were like, okay, well, yes, we can send an officer out there. We don't know how long it'll take, but they're not going to be able to take your bike with you back to the cottage you're staying at. And I just said, fine, we'll tie it up out here on one of these poles. And that's what ended up happening. It took a while for the officer to get out there, because my description of the area, all I could describe was it was at close to the intersection that turned off into Warsaw, because I didn't know the name of the road. But I managed to actually flag down a car that stopped for a while and actually stayed with me I stayed in their headlights. They just stayed with me until the police showed up. And yeah, the officer arrived. They were nice enough. Okay, and another thing about police, unless I get a feeling from it, I don't like assuming that. I said this in my leaving Toronto video. I hate the policing systems of the world. I hate them with a fiery passion. They are horribly managed, horribly set up. Just how the idea of policing is done, like the entire, not the concept of policing, but the ideals towards how it is utilized are abysmal. But I don't assume that all cops are terrible people. I think most are very encroaching and manipulative people. Most. Hell, with, again, how modern policing is done, and has been throughout pretty well all of history, it's manipulation is kind of in their job description, somewhat. But there are those who work outside of the system, or try to, and actually try to help people and do good with it. That's not me idolizing police. I'm just genuinely saying what I feel to be a fact. I don't like saying for... Here's another thing I find to do with, like, people's just being hypocritical on things. There are people who are more left-leaning like me who say all cops are terrible because they chose to be in a system that's terrible, therefore they are terrible as well. Well, then you are also a terrible person because you're choosing to work within an oppressive capitalist economic system, and you're not doing anything major about it. You're not starting a revolution. You're not starting some sort of revolt against... Even a peaceful revolt of any kind. You may protest, but you're not actively leading a cause or a part of it to destroy that system, at least right now, because they have things to do in their lives to take care of, and they have no choice really but to act in that way. So does that not make you hypocritical too? But does that not make you a terrible person as well, because you're contributing to a system that, even though you know it's not your... You support people who try and dismantle it. It's not your passion to do so, even though you support it. But anyway, I think you get what I'm trying to say. Bottom line is, the cop, they were nice enough. I told the operator, I let them know, hey, I have weapons on me. I'm just letting you know. I have a pocket knife. So to just let the officer know that I do have, like, I am armed in a way, just so that they're aware and don't freak out if they find that I have it. So they confiscated that for the ride. And like, I do just need to have that up front with me for, well, during the ride. And so we locked up my bike on a pole. They drove me all the way back to here. And my neighbor here, who is up here on the point all the time, and one of the few people who is always up here, has a paranoia disorder, is very much... They're very irritable, and they might be depressed as well, internally depressed. They seem to be having slight memory issues. Someone told me about it when I was coming up here, and I was worried from what they described that it could be the possibility of dementia, so I wanted to actually talk to them just to see, like, assess them a bit. But at least in my opinion, and again, I'm not in the medical field, but from my knowledge of what I know, it doesn't appear to be dementia in any way. It's just they're very paranoid and can be very complainative, I'd say. And also they're very, they have a religious superiority, somewhat. They're heavily religious. I'm not going to state their religion, but they're very religious. And at points have been in the past, at least, very extremist with it. So they got mad at me for bringing loud noise and headlights into the road, because they claim it disturbs them sleeping. I call bullshit for the most part, but it's also a road and we have to share it to get up here. Anyway, so the officer dropped me off and they left, and then the next day I walked out of the village that I'm staying at and called a tow truck to have them come pick me up and us go get my bike. And I got it, and, well, Timmy had more damage to him. They had holes in the tank, as you'll see in a video or a clip that I took the last day I had him. And yeah, I was able to make him last, but yeah, it was not long before I had to give him up. But anyway, that was the scariest experience that I've ever had so far. At least it's on par with me not doing anything to stop kidnapping in Toronto. And so there are 3 possibilities as to what that was. But now, what's even more terrifying to me, I am more inclined to believe 2 other ones, or 2 of them specifically. God, that's really bothering me. Okay, I think I got it. So anyway, the 3 possibilities, as far as I see it, in my opinion, logically, are A, it was dark, I was dissociating, and I was freezing, and my light was having issues, and all that culminated into my ocular senses being disrupted in some way and causing the dark to play tricks on my eyes, or maybe even potentially causing me to hallucinate, because I guess maybe because of the environment and how dark it was, my amygdala was kicking in a bit with a response of fear and adrenaline, because the amygdala is the part of the brain that controls fear. But so that's option A. B is that it was an animal of some kind, a wolf, dog, by some stretch of the imagination, a bear. I don't think so. We don't have polar bears usually in Canada. We don't usually have polar bears this far south. Well, they're having the rare grizzly bears, which are like a mix between a grizzly and a polar bear, that have been spotted in some parts of Ontario, but they're more so up north. So that's unlikely. Or one of my friends suggested the possibility of a mountain cat, like a lynx, or don't know what other mountain cats are actually here in Ontario. Well, not really even mountain cats, just wild, large felines, like, because we don't have very many mountains here in Ontario. But, so, just an animal of some kind, or a coyote of some kind, possibly. So that's option B. And option C is that it was some unknown creature of some kind, or thing. Now, that doesn't mean that a creature isn't an animal, but some unknown animal. That's option C. Now, that's the more unlikely one, or it is a more unlikely one. Now, I'm just going to say right now, as you've probably heard from how I believe in most things in terms of logic and reasoning, I don't believe in, like, what would be considered the supernatural. I don't believe in, like, I don't believe in otherworldly forces. I don't believe in well, I don't believe in like mystical spiritual folklore in that sense. They're incredibly interesting to learn about and things like that, and how it's influenced culture in many ways, and how it's very important to especially many of the indigenous people groups around all of Canada. And obviously the stories have merit to them, like in terms of what they teach. But I'm just saying, in terms of a spiritual religious stance, I don't believe in them. And I don't tend to believe in like stuff of, okay, well, when I say unknown creature, I acknowledge obviously there are things in this world that we don't know. There are sightings of things that we have no explanation for. An unknown creature could literally just be an unknown animal that we haven't discovered yet. So there's that. Whether or not it's a threat to you, that's determined by the situation. Depends. But basically, it was whatever one of the three options it was. It doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't, whichever one was true, even if it was a hallucination or the dark playing tricks on my ocular senses, it doesn't matter. It was still horrifying. Like, I remember, like, one of my friends who I called after the incident in Toronto was trying to tell me, Cam, you were dissociating, use logical thinking, it was probably your eyes playing tricks on you. In the dark, which I know, by the way, because of neuroscience as well, and how it actually, the environment affects your brain, where in very dark, what am I trying to say? In not well lit areas, and you aren't able to see very well, the human mind will make, most often subconsciously, make up shapes, basically, and try and create familiar patterns out of what is being detected around you, basically, by your eyes or your ears in audiological senses, or smells. Your mind will make up, basically, and I don't want to say make up as if it's not real. It will induce picking out, okay, it will take from basically what you have known from mental imaging or imagination, in a sense, of of things that you know of and are able to visually recognize. It'll take bits and pieces of that information and relay it basically to your environment around you when you can't see. So you may think that in total darkness, though, this is what I'm getting at, though, that I recently learned only works in total darkness. It'll make out something that looks familiar. And if it just so happens to look like a person standing in dark woods, then it could look like a person standing in dark woods. Now, the reason, though, I'm a little more skeptical as well to believe, and again, I'm saying that doesn't make, whether or not I hallucinated or not, doesn't make it any less terrifying. Still horrific. Like, yeah, I don't get this about how, like, it was probably just your mind. Yeah, well, even if it was just my mind, doesn't change how horrifying it was. I'm horrified because if that was a hallucination, then that's the first hallucination I've ever had in my life, and I wasn't tripping on any sort of psychotropic drugs, or any sort of stimulant. So that's terrifying. But here's the reason I'm not entirely inclined to believe that, because if it was just merely a light trick of the senses, as I'll say, I don't think I would have seen it running behind me or following me. I don't think, unless, again, if it was a full-blown hallucination. From what I thought I saw, was it running behind me, directly behind me. And so I'm a little skeptical of that. Now, why I'm more inclined to believe the latter two options of an animal or an unknown creature. Let me just check the timestamp. Yep, 45. Why I'm more inclined to believe those two now is because a few weeks ago when I was doing some reading up and research for, well, neurology, basically, and also I was looking at YouTube, and one of my favorite creators had also talked about this in one of their videos, a little skit they did, who unfortunately, well, that creator turned out to be a very, well, not a terribly great person, so I decided to unsubscribe from their channel, just because I didn't want to support them. Well, similar to the whole Gus Johnson situation. Well, not similar to... It had to do with separating the art from the artist, but more so they made factual videos, so that's something else. That's something else. It's a different topic. Anyway, I had seen them do a small video on this, and after doing further research, into it, apparently, little neurological fact, in the dark or in a darkened environment, when there is even the smallest amount of light projection from somewhere, your eyes and ocular senses actually adjust to focus on the small amounts of darkness that are apparent. And I don't know if I'm going to explain this completely correct, or in a way that'll make sense, but they adjust to the darkness that's around that light source. So basically, if it's pitched, if you have like a flashlight that's pointing forward in totally dark basement, your eyes will adjust to where the light is also going. Like, it will adjust to make out what is going on in the darkness out here from the small amounts of light projection, apparently. And also to the blaring light that's right in front of you, but it also heavily adjusts to what's around you. And technical science terms out of the way, apparently, from what I read and looked up, that means that if you were able to make something out in the darkness or in the areas that weren't very well lit from the light, you probably actually saw what was over to the side there. So basically, if you saw something in the darkness from the light, like not even like directly on it, off to the sides, if you saw something scurrying along or moving about, chances are, or there's a higher chance that you probably actually saw something move. Now, obviously, whether that something is a threat or not, that, well, again, that's determined by what happens after you see it move. But either way, you possibly still saw something. It's actually a higher chance that you did. And after reading that, I was like, oh, wow, that is a horrible, horrifying thought. Because that seems to be more indicating that what I saw, given how terrible my light was and the small amount that it was producing forward in front of me, and the amount that it was actually shining on the sides, that would make it a lot more likely that I actually saw something right beside me. And when I swiveled the light around behind me to look, that I also actually saw something directly behind me, chasing me. So, yeah, that's, well, not a comforting thought. But, so that's why I'm more now inclined to believe that it was either an animal of some kind, or some beast of the unknown horrors of the underworld or something. I don't know. Just, again, don't believe in supernatural supernatural elements of like spirituality or even folklore. I don't believe that they're like mystical in any sense. Now that doesn't mean like if you've also gone to like the channel, this like the followed channels section of my channel, you'd probably see that you can see all the channels that I'm subscribed to, and because I also set them like that so I can find them easily, so that I can just scroll and oh yeah, there it is. But and also if anyone who follows me wants to check them out, because I think they're good channels. But anyway, I also listen to a lot of people's horror experiences, like with supposedly true horror stories. One thing I really hate though is like, even though I love the stories that they're telling, there are many that are definitely not true, or at the very least, I just really wish that a lot of like the horror story narrator channels, which I do love a lot of them, but like Lazy Masquerade, Unit 522, Mr. Nightmare, I think there's Creeps Reads, I don't know if that's what it's called. What's another one? Horror Babble isn't a true story narration, but anyway, like channels like there's one that goes off of, I don't usually watch much of the whole Ask Reddit type videos, but there's one really good channel that works on things like that, with specifically with different stories, but a lot of it is horrific encounter experiences type thing, or scary factual knowledge. Would be Dr. Hollow, which they are incredibly good with what they do. Because I usually think a lot of the Ask Reddit narrated videos are kind of over dramatic, or at the very least they're, well, not over, they're overly edited, they're just very poorly done, I'd say. But anyway, and I don't mean like you need like huge amounts of like technical support to make something good. I'm just saying like just the way they present it is. Anyway, I listen to a lot of things like that because I like hearing the experience of other people, but I really wish a lot of them would put like allegedly true horror stories. Like a lot of them, though I love their channels and love what they do, they are guilty of making very clickbaity titles, which I really don't like. Like 5 terrifying true horror stories. Come on, you know, anyone who's watching this, you know that's what they do. Literally, they highlight the true horror experience. It's just like, I really wish they would just put allegedly. But anyway, I don't want to deny like a lot of the stories that are told in that, whether or not it was like severe hallucination or a psychotic episode of some kind, or if something really did happen and there's no real explanation to it, they could have very well happened. Those stories could have very well happened. Just because it's not supernatural. I think a lot of people don't understand this. Is I actually kind of got into a conversation with with one of my coworkers about this a few days ago. I didn't tell them my thoughts on this, but like, just because something, like someone's telling something as if it's supernatural, and you're saying, oh, well, that's ridiculous. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in specters. I don't believe in Bigfoot or the Loch Ness, or like any of that, like supernatural elements or paranormal activity or demonic entities. Well, that doesn't mean that that thing they're describing didn't happen. It probably isn't. It's most likely at all not any sort of supernatural thing, but that doesn't mean that horrific incident didn't happen. Like, I genuinely do believe a lot of the people who tell, like, say, in ghost stories, if they say they've had a paranormal haunting experience, I do believe that something probably did happen. Do I believe it was a ghost? No, but I have no explanation. I literally just say the logical thing, or what I think is logical. I don't know what happened to you. I don't know what... I don't have an explanation for what it was, but I damn well know it wasn't a ghost. Whatever it was, don't know, but still sounds terrifying. So, yeah, like, I don't believe in any sort of thing like that. Doesn't negate the fact that I was terrified in the instance, if it was an animal or some unknown thing. Or a hallucination. Oh, God. Focus. Okay. There. Okay. Yeah. It was horrific. But moving on from that, I want to talk about more things as well. That was, I guess, kind of the kickoff of this. I want to talk about branching off that, what exactly scares me. Like, not on a... like, just on a broad sense. Like, in terms of... what am I afraid of? And I don't mean, like... well, I guess I'm not... okay, I'm not talking about, like, say, like I said, my fears and insecurities. I'm not going to be talking about, like, what in entertainment, like, scares me the most, or, well, obviously that can bleed into... okay, you know what? I'm going to shut up with that. That tangent is probably going to go nowhere. What I want to talk about, what terrifies me. So, let me just pick this apart right now. So I didn't really give it much thought, actually, unfortunately, before recording this. Well, I give it thought technically in many regards every day, but like really in depth before I started the footage. Well, let's start with my phobias, or at least my most major phobia. I have a metaphobia, so I have the fear of vomiting, which I've stated before. I said in the suicidal ideation video, I believe, when I talked about how I starved for a year because of chronic nausea, that I didn't know why exactly I had the fear of vomiting, but I could probably point to, like, a traumatic vomiting experience in my past that could have induced it. And now that I'm thinking about it, it might have been a time when I was, like, 9 or 10, when I was living in the United States, and in Fargo, North Dakota, and I think I had, like, the flu. Yeah, I had the flu, like, really bad, the stomach flu, and I was puking, and I guess that might have done it. Or maybe it was a combination of, like, different instances of me throwing up that made me fear it. And the fear isn't so much... well, not actually, it's not at all. I'm completely fine with... well, not fine. I care if, like, someone's feeling sick, but I'm not afraid of someone else vomiting. I'm afraid of only myself vomiting. And it might also... oh! Oh my god! I just remembered something. That is probably what did it. Okay. Here's a little story time. When I was initially living here at school, I was born here in Canada. I think I talked about this. Did I talk about this? I might have somewhat talked about this in my suicidal ideation video, and I think also... yeah, I think I did in, like, my Leaving Toronto video, about how I was born here in Canada and lived here for 7 years, moved to the US for about 6 years, came back here. So I lived here when I was very young, because I'm a dual national, I'm Canadian American. But I remember this in 2nd grade here. God, it's all coming back. We were having lunch, I think, and like, you know how your parents, when you're in Canada, at least in the United States and Canada, it's very typical, and also in Europe, in many instances, Western Europe, and Australia as well, I'm assuming, that, and also, well, what am I saying? Yes, there are multiple countries that would do this for their children in schools, but you know how you would pack a lunch for just kindergartners or like elementary kids just to eat at lunchtime? I remember now distinctly that there was a day where my family had given me bacon, and given me bacon and for my lunch, and I was eating it and I choked on it, and I was severely choking to a point where I think I would have needed to have the Heimlich maneuver, but nobody was around to give it to me, and like kids were just looking at me. And I remember I think one was saying, oh, he's choking, and then I threw up, probably as a reflex to try and get the bacon out of my throat, my body's own self-absorption mechanism. Instead of choking, it triggered a gag reflex to get it out, which got it out, and I literally threw up all over the table. And then I went to the washroom, just in case I needed to again, because I was pretty well hyperventilating because I couldn't breathe, and then I threw up again outside, like, the washroom door. So, you know what? Yeah, maybe that was the traumatic incident that caused my emetophobia. I don't know. That actually seems like it would be more logical. Yeah, I'm just fucking brought back a repressed memory, I guess, right on camera. Anyway. Oh, where am I going? Okay, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. So, anyway, I have fear of vomiting. Still. I haven't exactly, well, when I was very sick, I tried to break that fear. And, well, it didn't work very well. But, okay, so that's one. Oh yes, another one I've talked about. I have thanosophobia, I believe it's called. No, not thanosophobia. That's fear of giant things, I believe, in the ocean. But, I know it begins with a T. I have fear of death. I fear death, dying. And I've explained this before. People may say, like, a lot of, specifically atheists, tell me, like, why do you fear death? It comes to us all. You shouldn't fear death. It can hold you back from many things. Well, in a sense, you could be right, but here's the thing, well, about holding you back, which, well, actually, okay, I don't fully believe that, and also, I don't care that it comes to us all. Just because, and I'm not going to deny that I'm open with people about this. I fear death. I don't, like, say, oh, I'm not scared to die. I would jump in front of a train. I am so numb to the emotion of fear and the afterlife. I fear death. It doesn't matter to me that it comes to us all. It's still a terrifying concept to me. Whether or not the fact that I am open to the idea of an afterlife It doesn't matter, even the fact that people even tell me, like, but if you believe in an afterlife, then why are you scared? There's no saying that an afterlife is nice. Like, a lot of people, like, when they hear the belief of, like, agnostic atheism, when I talk about how I'm open to the possibility of an afterlife, of another dimension, of our consciousness potentially being able to project to somewhere, or who knows where we go. Technically, actually, you know, the way you can look at it, technically a lot of atheists believe in just a blackened void. Well, technically, a blackened void is somewhere. A blackened void is technically just... It is a place. If our consciousness just goes to nothingness, is that nothingness technically a place? I guess so. And hey, if we were in that nothingness beforehand, before we were born, could we potentially come back from it? Who knows? No one's come back to tell us. We have no scientific understanding of that. We also have no scientific proof of a blackened void, by the way, which is why I don't go with that. But here's the thing. Whichever one you believe, it doesn't make it any less terrifying. Whether you believe in astral projection or the possibility of our consciousness just floating in just ethereal spaces, not being able to communicate with anyone, or being able to communicate in some ways with consciousnesses that have also passed, or not, or a blackened void, or whatever else. Again, I'm not a theoretical physicist, so it's just from my own knowledge of it, of the theories regarding it. It doesn't matter. It's still a terrifying concept to me. Like, we don't know. I'm going to say this right now. We do not know what comes after death. And even if we do know, that idea of what comes after might be horrifying. So, yeah, I'm not afraid to deny that. And I truly believe, actually, and I've said this even in... Because I have a will and last statement that I've actually typed out in my phone. And also, I had it handwritten, but, well, that's with people in my household back where I used to live. I've somewhat edited it while I've been away, but I've just said fuck it to it. I don't even know or care if... I don't know if it's worth doing. I wanted to have something to make sure that stuff I had was secure once I was gone. I've had the will since I was like 16, and I've obviously revised it heavily since then, but I said in my last statement along the lines of, I genuinely believe that everyone on this planet, in some regard, whether it be in the smallest possible regard, fears death. I do. People a lot of times like to get cocky and think, or they like to see themselves as more than emotional. Or they see themselves as... It's almost like... I mean, well, yeah, actually... Fuck. What am I saying? There are plenty of idiots who believe that emotion is just a sign of weakness. Couldn't be farther from the truth, but... Well... Yeah, yeah, I'm talking directly at you, fucking Andrew Tate, you... Someone like him, a man with major incelistic personality disorder, complete incel misogynist. He's also a narcissist and an egotist. He's probably a sociopath as well. But, my God, I do not like that man. Jesus Christ. Andrew, if you ever end up seeing this, please get help. Like, don't just stand up and make your psychoanalyst shit his pants. How about you actually take their advice? Your muscles won't stop the crippling loneliness. So, or a crippling thought of failure. If you do have that. I don't know. I'm not your... psychologist. So anyway, I just also really hate that guy is in one of the professions. He's in the field of profession I want to go into. He owns fucking pornographic cam model like houses for cam girls, and God, I do not like the fact that that man is in. He helps contribute in giving sex work a bad name. He really does. Anyway, I fear the beyond. Because I firmly believe that you will be terrified in the moments leading to your death. You will see your life flash before your eyes. That might sound cliche, but it's been reported to happen. In fact, actually, in a recent scientific discovery, after a patient in Latvia, I think it was, died during a... It was... I don't think... It wasn't an MRI. No, it wasn't an MRI. Was it a CT scan? It was some sort of scan. I don't remember what the actual radiologic scan was, but it was examining the brain and the brain structure in the cerebrum more specifically, and they saw the patient had a seizure, and I think it was testing for epilepsy. The patient had a seizure and died, sadly, very sadly, and they actually got to see what regions of the brain specifically light up during death, or at the very least what lit up during that patient's death. Now, maybe it's different depending on the person, but... And also got to see technically what parts of the brain shut down, I think, as well, like, first. Because... Okay, well, anyway, I'm getting off track. You will see your life flash before your eyes. You will see your regrets. You will see, well, if you have any. You will see all your mistakes and all your greatest moments. And I genuinely feel that, in some sense, those who actually can, or do have more of a heightened sense to fear, and again, there are those who have a low sense to fear as well, in terms of, like, people who are born with sociopathy and things like that. Where you will, I generally think in the smallest regard, someone will be afraid. And I've tried getting over it, but you know what? I'm really not concerned with it right now. And again, I stated, it's not like I will do anything to keep myself alive. I don't believe that. That's completely self-centered as well. At least, again, logically, I don't believe that. But I just, during especially my whole crisis of existence and ethics, that hasn't been something that's primarily been on my mind, my whole fear of death. I'm not afraid, like, I'm saying I'm afraid to die. I'm not afraid to die alone. There are unfortunately many people who internalize the fear of dying alone, and it can lead to very, well, dastardly consequences, but, like, I'm going to say this right now. We all will die alone. At least in my opinion, if you're a religious person, you believe that, but I firmly believe that we will all die alone. Now, you may not die physically alone, like you're with people, but internally, our psychological states, our essence, our being, our internalized self, our thoughts, you will be alone in your own body. You will be the one whose physiological state is shutting down, and the brain is slowly starting to turn off. But here's a comforting thing, though. For those who are afraid of death, like me, here's a comforting thought. This is actually what probably keeps me from being crippled by the fear, potentially. is, again, check that. Okay, it's fine. What keeps me, I guess, from being completely... Okay, that's just a tree. What keeps me from being paralyzed by that thought is... It's a scientific fact, and specifically in neuroscience, that the last few seconds of life in any person will always be peaceful. Now, what do I mean by that? So, there are a variety of ways someone could lose their life in this world. Violently and brutally and painfully, or it could go somberly, just minimalist torment and passing on with relative ease. But for those who would die very horrible, grotesque, and gruesome deaths, the pain in the moment of being, well, violated, I guess, in that way, and destroyed in that way, is incredibly painful. But as your brain is beginning to shut off, all your senses are going out the window. Like, say, let's use an example. I remember some of my friends didn't get what I meant when I said, say someone points a gun to your head. You are afraid. You are feeling, obviously, like you're going to die. Or at least, say if someone has the fear of death and they're basically begging for their life to please not be killed. The person doesn't listen, they shoot them through the head. It destroys their primary neurological functions, their primary neural cortexes in their cerebrum. And you go in that moment, because nothing is functioning correctly, the connections have all been destroyed, or at least the upper connection, depending on where you shoot from. Because actually, a bullet through the brain isn't entirely guaranteed to kill you, just letting, well, sadly there have been suicidal accidents where people have permanently cognitively damaged themselves because they technically didn't know how to blow their brains out correctly to actually ensure that they die. But damages in neural cortex, let's say in this instance that it is a fatal wound to the head. You go into a catatonic state where your body is unable to move. You're not able to... You're paralyzed, you're not able to move. You're not able to function. And in those moments, your different neural cortexes are slowly shutting off. Let's say it was... Okay, so... I forget what... I don't think... Because again, we've technically never been able to fully measure until recently, like I said about the case in Latvia, about what regions would shut off first of the brain. But let's just say first your ocular senses go from the occipital lobe. Your hearing, your ocular senses start to fizzle away. The neurons and the nuclei start to shut off, basically. They start to become inactive. Then it moves to your cingulate cortex. Emotions of excitement, awkwardness, disgust, irritability, all that controlled by the cingulate cortex start to fizzle away, shut off. Facial recognition in the parietal lobe, environmental spatial recognition, aware of surroundings, starts to, again, be shut off. And also your ability for, well, facial expression and articulation and coordination of vocabulary has been destroyed as well, shut off, not working. Your prefrontal cortex, memories, storage of intellectual knowledge and certain concepts begins to fizzle away slowly again. Like, it's going through all the cortexes just till it stops. frontal lobe, happiness, sadness, depression, well, joy, happiness as well. God, I'm tired. Why am I not remembering the fucking function of the frontal lobe? Anyway, then the temporal lobe, shutting off anger and more, which is also responsible for moral judgment and decision making, motivation, and then in the limbic system, hippocampal region is shutting off, stopping from the amygdala, shutting off as well, stopping cortisol for stress, anxiety, so literally, and adrenaline. So basically, once the amygdala goes, you're no longer as well able to process fear. You're no longer able to feel what fear is once that is, well, permanently damaged. You're not able to have a sense of what the emotion of terror is or worry. It all just fizzles away. Then would move to, say, it ways probably to, well, obviously the basal ganglia would, I'd assume if it was shot directly through the head, it would probably rip through actually the limbic system and the basal ganglia, and then also cut off connection to the midbrain, which would stop a lot of chemical production to other regions of the brain, and also hinder, well, projection of consciousness would be completely destroyed. And then, well, projection of consciousness is also controlled by hypothalamus and also the reticular activating system in the pons of the brain. And then the pons also control pain sensory. So basically, once the connections to the pons and the nucleus have also been damaged terribly, then pain receptors are just inactive. They're not functioning nominally anymore. So you literally can't feel pain anymore. And then let's say eventually it makes its way to the medulla oblongata, which controls all your involuntary responses, such as breathing and swallowing and sneezing and digestion, and most importantly, heartbeat and heart rate. That is damaged and completely shut off now. Like connections between that. Like if you were going brain dead basically slowly, or causing, if there was cerebral death happening from the initial bullet impact with you going into the catatonic state, once the medulla has been has had enough neural death, well, then you're gone. Your consciousness, your heart rate is gone. Your breath is gone. So you're dead. At that moment, you are dead. And your consciousness passes on to wherever comes next, whatever it is. So basically, what I'm saying is that to me is actually a comforting thought for my fear of death, is that knowing that no matter how painful or how much you're suffering during the time leading up to your death, the process of dying itself, as your entire organs shut off, and specifically with my knowledge to neurology, your entire nervous system is shutting down, which is also controls the psychological state. So your entire psyche is fizzling away. That will feel painless to you, basically. You will literally not be able to discern what basically anything is anymore. It's like, which is another reason actually, like, to the disease, well, not the disease, the condition known as, obviously in neurology, as dementia is such a terrifying and interesting concept to me. There are many different forms of dementia that are all related as the atrophy of the brain structure. And the different forms can originate in different regions, like Alzheimer's is known, and Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease usually start with atrophy from the hippocampus and then move upward to the prefrontal cortex, and then I believe out to the frontal lobe, and then it spreads to the entirety of the brain structure out from there. Then Then with Huntington's disease, I believe the atrophy starts in the outer areas of the temporal lobe or in the temporal cingulate region, somewhere along here, in the intersections of it close to the limbic system, and then spreads outward. And then, frontotemporal dementia starts the atrophy in the frontotemporal region of the brain, close to the frontal lobe, and then spreads, I believe, outward to the rest of the temporal lobe and then the occipital. And it, in my opinion, frontotemporal dementia is the worst form of dementia. It's heartbreaking because frontotemporal dementia, two of the main symptoms known for it is heavy aggression and potential violent outbursts, and also sociopathy is associated with, frontotemporal dementia, because the temporal lobe controls, aggression in many instances. And the frontal lobe also controls empathy and compassion as well, so there's that. And then childhood dementia, also sometimes known as Botton's disease as well, starts in the occipital lobe, often associated with first vision issues, and then it spreads upward into parietal, and then it goes out from there. Lewy body dementia, there's an interesting thing between Lewy body dementia and Parkinsonian dementia, is most often they're so similar because both caused by Lewy bodies as well, Lewy body plaques, and because in Parkinson's disease, Lewy bodies are very much present in basal ganglia and brainstem. This is also which causes much of the destruction of dopamine cells and also dopamine receptors within the basal ganglia, because it's what controls a lot of mobility function and as well as regulates a lot of dopamine production. But anyway, Lewy bodies are present, and in some cases of Parkinson's, it can lead to further atrophy, or it can lead to spreading atrophy starting in the basal ganglia, and then I believe for Parkinsonian, it can vary which way it spreads outward from that, but usually to the rest of the limbic system. But where it's so hard to diagnose between Parkinsonian dementia and Lewy body dementia is the fact that they both start usually in the basal ganglia, but Lewy body usually, I believe, goes first to the occipital cortex. Well, not first. Second goes to the occipital cortex after the basal ganglia atrophy begins, and then spreads upward from there into a lot of the rest of the cerebrum. And basically, it's so hard to tell because, usually people who have early onset Lewy body dementia are diagnosed first with Parkinson's because, again, from spreading in the basal ganglia, it can cause shakes, sweat, and it can affect the endocrine system, causing a lot of perspiration and just jitteriness, shakiness, unstable gait, and shuffliness. So it can come off at first as potential Parkinson's disease or some form of Parkinsonism. And then when they do start showing symptoms such as what's common with Lewy body dementia, as well as hallucinations because of the effects of the occipital lobe, there have been cases, and then it goes as well potentially through parietal, and then also to affect the rest of the limbic system with the hippocampus, causing memory issues, severe cognitive disrupt. It's then often diagnosed as Parkinsonian dementia, so they don't actually know what dementia it is. And Lewy body is more severe, or has been reported as being more severe than Parkinsonian. Or because of the hallucinations, it could potentially be misdiagnosed as, say, schizophrenia, or maybe even schizoaffective disorder, or schizoactive, maybe even schizophrenia, even though I gotta look up what technically is counted as schizophrenia now. But anyway, so dementia is a very terrifying concept to me. I many times actually think about what would I do if I was. I thought about it a lot actually when I was having the psychosomatic neurological problems and the memory issues, which mine was because of the dissociation depression mainly, which dissociation and depression have both been known to cause dementia-like symptoms in terms of memory. But I often thought, what if I am diagnosed with dementia? What do I do? Well, I'm glad that Canada has now legalized medically assisted euthanasia or medically assisted suicide, because I would probably try and spend as much time as I could with, I would try to do the things I wanted to do in like a short amount of time, or stuff that I thought it was achievable in a short amount of time, while I still had cognitive sanity with me and like was able to maintain well cognitive function. And once symptoms started getting worse, I would probably then go through with medically assisted suicide, because it is a very horrible death, dementia. You are losing your mind on every possible scale imaginable. Rabies is a horror, as I mentioned in my video filming Randall, is a horrific virus as well, a neurological virus. It affects the pons, it causes atrophy of the entire brainstem, causes also disrupt of the occipital lobe, and, well, it's like dementia on a smaller scale rabies, pretty much, if it gets to an advanced stage. It can also cause cerebellar degeneration with it. Cerebellar degeneration is pretty bad too. Well, cerebellar degeneration isn't necessarily going to kill you. There are multitude of cases where cerebellar degeneration kills the patient, but it's not necessarily going to disrupt the rest of the brainstem. Well, the cerebellum isn't technically the brainstem. It's its own region. It controls movement and balance, it plays a heavy role in motor functionality, also as well as functionality of hand-eye, coordination in a sense. Oh, and my phone is dying. How long are we at here? An hour and 30. Well, I may have to stop in a minute and do a part 4, and I'll probably plug my phone in for that one. So, yeah, it's, bottom line of what I'm saying is, that is a comforting thought for me for fear of death, is knowing that the last moments of your conscious state, the last seconds, which you could potentially feel like hours because of the disruption of your neural cortexes, you basically won't be able to tell what reality is. Okay, if there are any stoners who are watching this, imagine, again, I've never done marijuana, I just know of the effects and obviously people's stories of it, but I get an understanding of how it affects people, the disruption and the very relaxed and very lethargic state it can put you into, and very calmed, or potentially anxious, depending on how it affects you, anxious state can put you in. But for those of you who have gotten very, very calm, an overwhelming sense of warmness when you do marijuana, I guess I would like to tell you to imagine the most disrupted you felt, cognitively, but also feeling really relaxed through all of it. That is what basically death would be, as your brain is shutting down. You literally could not tell what is what anymore. The concept of conception is just no more when you're dying. So yeah, that's a comforting thought, at least for me. But so that's another one of my fears. I'm going to stop this here and then keep going with recording after this, just to get the last of it down, hopefully, and possibly talk about my landscaping job. So yeah, I'm just gonna pick this up right from where I left off on it. So yeah, continue the next one.